Reddit. Describe the most terrifying thing that has ever happened to you. I was 6 years old and I was in the car with my mother, grandmother, and my cousin. It was 1979 and it was October. Someone ran a stop sign and my mother swerved to miss them and hit a telephone pole. The only image I have of my mother is her slumped over the steering wheel and blood pouring out of her face. My cousin was sitting next to me, was screaming at the top of her lungs. I don't remember seeing my grandmother. My mother and her mother both died that day. My cousin had her hip broken in numerous places. I had a sprained, broken, not 100% sure anymore, wrist, broken collarbone and some glass in me. That image terrifies me to this day. I'm sorry. My lung collapsed spontaneously. It felt like a pulled muscle in my shoulder. So I went home from work and went to bed after taking some painkillers. Woke up in the middle of the night needing to use the bathroom and could barely pull myself out of bed. Eventually managed it, but passed out on the way and got found in a heap at the top of the stairs by my parents. They sat with me for a minute. Then after seeing that I was okay, I wasn't, but I'm a dong and didn't want to scare them, went back to bed. In the morning I was in loads of pain, so they took me to a walk-in clinic. After an hour and a half wait where I turned yellow and was blacking out, I saw a doctor who immediately called an ambulance. I had emergency surgery on a ward where a doctor stuck a tube through my ribs into my lung, which spurted a good pint or so of blood down her front. I then had to carry the tube with a bucket on the end around hospital with me for 3 weeks. My lung got infected and I almost had to have the whole thing removed. This was a few weeks before my 19th birthday. I'm now 24 and totally fine, although I'm not allowed to scuba dive or be an astronaut. Although I'm not allowed to scuba dive or be an astronaut. There go all the cool jobs. I was 8, my sister was 6. We were crawling across the top of the monkey bars in our backyard. Our parents were inside eating. My sister was wearing a bicycle helmet and either decided to jump down or fell through the bars. She didn't fall all the way to the sawdust though, which I thought was weird, but from where I was, I didn't have a very good view of everything. I crawled to where she went through and looked down to see the back of her bicycle helmet caught on a level support bar for the swing set, which was part of the same structure, and the neck strap was strangling her. I clearly remember that she was kicking her legs, but that she was making no noise, nothing. I couldn't figure out what to do. I wasn't tall enough to pull her off from the ground, so I had to work from above. I lowered my body through the monkey bars and kicked the back of the bar and helmet, sending her flying face first into the sawdust maybe 8 feet below. She immediately started coughing and crying, but she was physically alright. We haven't spoken about it since that night. When I was in Russia, I was on my way to Moscow from St. Petersburg with some friends. We stopped at a McDonald's on the road. I know, you're supposed to do Russian things in Russia, but this was seriously the first stop we'd come across and we were all starving. We pulled up and grabbed something to eat. We were all hanging around and I noticed 2 of my guy friends were chatting with some Russian dudes at their car. I'm watching this from inside because I am waiting to use the bathroom. One Russian was clearly pretty drunk. He was wearing a t-shirt and it was November in Russia, near Moscow. I have never been so cold in my life. And he was with 3 other guys. They were all pretty huge and they all got out of the car to chat with my 2 friends. I finally get to use the bathroom and when I come out, I notice my friends are not talking with these dudes anymore and are heading back to the car. The Finn we were traveling with starts honking the horn to let us know we should head out, so I start heading towards the car. I have to go past these Russians who by now are all hanging around their car smoking. As I pass, one of them waves at me and I wave back. They say something in Russian but I have no idea what it is, and then one of them lunges at me, grabs me, picks me up, and starts trying to shove me into their car. I'm a pretty small girl but I start struggling and fighting back and screaming. My 2 friends start running back to where I am and the Finn pulls the car forward. I'm just struggling and trying not to let them push me through the door. One of them has gotten into the driver's seat and started their car, but I'm still half hour of the vehicle as my friends rush up and pull the guy, and me in his arms, back from the car. I guess they had thought that I was alone and maybe easy prey, but then they realized that I was with 3 guys. He put me down and put his hands up, and tried to laugh it off and smile as my friends pull me back behind them and try to be menacing. We all get in the car and pull away. The Finn let me know I was lucky, and that white slavery is a big problem in Russia, and that I should definitely never travel alone. TLDR. Almost got kidnapped in Russia. I was calm through the whole incident, but the scariest thing that happened to me was slicing an artery in half with a knife while at work. The amount of blood that cascaded out was nothing like I've ever seen. I had my other hand covering the slice on my wrist, putting pressure on it. I told a coworker I need to go to the hospital now, but he thought I was exaggerating and asked me to let him see it. I took my hand off, which relieved the pressure, and blood shot about 4 feet in the air and splattered everywhere like a volcano. The idiot at the counter tried to make me fill out paperwork before a doctor saw me. I said no, I need to see a doctor now. The doctor had me lie down and asked the same thing my coworker said, so I warned him the blood will shoot out if I let go of it. He said it's okay, so I complied. Blood spewing everywhere. He ran around the room looking for gauze and screaming for help. I had emergency surgery about 20 minutes later and they were able to reattach the artery back together and it worked fine. I was out of the hospital and back to work the next day. My whole arm turned black from all the blood that had leaked into the arm and I had to hold my arm up over my head for a week or so to let it all drain out. The scariest part was the anesthesiologist telling me there was a chance I could die on the operating table because of blood loss. So I told him to hurry up then. When I was 17 I got stung by a yellow jacket on the top of my head. This wasn't a big deal. I had been stung many times before. I went upstairs feeling a little woozy, thinking it was simply because the bite was on my head. I called my now ex-boyfriend and was talking to him. I happened to look down at my arm and noticed bumps were starting on it. Thinking it was weird and still feeling really messed up in the head, I wandered downstairs to tell my mom, all while still talking to my BF. I get into the kitchen. She takes one look at me, shrieks and tells me we're going to the hospital. By the time we get to the hospital literally every part of my body is covered in hives. My head is pounding with blood and my throat is starting to close. Luckily they hooked me up to some Benadryl and I was okay. I learned then that it is entirely possible to develop a life-threatening allergy past infancy childhood. Now I'm allergic to bees and wasps and it sucks. In hindsight, this was probably scariest for my ex. I had to leave him hanging with nothing more than an "I've got to go," but still, having been relatively healthy my entire life, it was scary as crap. 16 years old, on the way home from passing my driver's license test. Dad in the passenger seat. Red light turns green. I look both ways. It's all clear. Start crossing the intersection. Dad suddenly holds up his hand and calmly says wait. A blink later a car that hadn't even been in sight when I looked blasts by at about 70 miles an hour and misses us by 3 feet. TLDR. Almost killed in a car crash on the way home from passing my license test. A year or two ago, I was walking on the sidewalk, about to cross the street, which was a little crosswalk at the front of a highway exit. I'm waiting there. I hear a loud screech and look over and 2 cars are going super fast, maybe racing, around the exit. One of them cuts the other off and it hits the curb and starts spinning. I jumped back and sorta stuck my butt out further back. So I went from standing straight, vertical bar, to jumping a bit back and bending. The trunk of the spinning car literally went within that space. My head was above the trunk looking straight down at the trunk of this car as it whipped past my body and didn't even touch me. It was freaking terrifying. I was climbing a tree, fell, and impaled myself on a branch below. Luckily, the branch hit a rib and stopped me in midair rather than puncturing anything important and or me falling 20-30 feet to the ground. I was doing some spins under my parachute while skydiving when a gust of wind caught my canopy and flipped me up above it. I missed falling right into it by maybe 10 inches. I was slingshotted 50 feet into the air by a loose zipline only to land on top of my left arm, breaking my wrist. The other one had been broken in a similar accident about 10 years earlier. Do us all a favor and stay on the ground more. It is pretty clear you were not designed to be in the air. I was about 12-13 years old when I watched my then stepfather rip my mother's shirt off her back, then tear off her bra and try and strangle her with it. He did choke her, but thankfully, She did not lose consciousness. All I could think about was what I would do to get away from him if she died. I was almost shot by a policeman who believed that my guitar case was a rifle in the front seat of my car. It was the worst birthday ever. Because having a rifle is against the law. I was a noob going for a little hike up a hill with my dad in amongst the Rockies. Long story short, we got in over our heads. What we thought was a hill was the nose of a huge mountain. Yes, it is possible to see a hill and not be able to see from some angles that it is part of a monster mountain. There was no way to come down the way we came. We had to keep climbing until we could get to the top of the part we were climbing and come down another way. The scariest part was a time when I was trying to catch my breath and had only a 2 or 3 inches ledge for one foot and a couple little places for my hands. I made the mistake of looking down. The drop wasn't straight like a cliff face, but it was almost that steep and certainly way too steep to stop any fall. I would have tumbled down 20 or 30 stories bashing myself on rock the whole way. The mixture of fear and exhaustion, this was after almost 3 hours of climbing for our lives, caused my foot to start twitching and shaking its way off of the little ledge. The other foot was already just dangling in the air with nowhere to go. My dad was blocking any further climbing, catching his breath and evaluating the next move. I was watching my foot shake itself off and finally blurted, "Dad, I need to be where you are right now." He found a way to get higher up and I found the strength to make it to where he was. A slightly better place to pause. I knew I was asking something risky of him, making him move without being prepared. So in addition to my own physical fear, I was terrified that I might cause him to fall. We both made it, and shortly after we were through the hardest part and then got to the top area we originally set out for. My mom, my wife and my daughter were 10 minutes away shopping. I was very scared for my dad. I was very scared for myself. But the real terrifying part was thinking of my wife explaining to my 2-year-old that I wasn't coming back. That was about 1,000 times more terrifying than the fear of physical pain from falling. I was taking the engine out of a 1976 Firebird. I was around 19-20 years old and had worked on cars quite a bit growing up and was comfortable underneath the car. I was working on removing the motor mount bolts from underneath, when in a split second I realized I was rocking the car while trying to break the rusty motor mount bolts, and at the same instant I recalled I also had forgotten to use jack stands. The moment I realized this is the moment the car rocked too far and came down on my chest. This car was lowered a bit, and while it didn't break any ribs, it knocked a little bit of the last breath I was able to take as it was coming down. I concluded if I screamed I probably wouldn't be able to inhale much, but I wasn't able to hold it much longer anyway, so I screamed like a person who believes they are dying screams. Thankfully 2 family friends just so happened to pull up in the driveway at the moment this was happening. 2 buddies grabbed each side of the front of the car and picked it up just enough for me to slide out, but not before dropping it once on me. Moral of the story: always use jack stands. A friend's dad died doing this. I always use jack stands now and am not afraid to tell the kids how I know someone who died because they didn't. They're probably tired of hearing the story. When 13, I was living in this ratty apartment complex with my mom. During the entire time I lived there, I was continually harassed by this one older kid who seemingly had an unquenchable rage boner for me. One day, while I was playing basketball, apropos of nothing, he came out on the court and shoved the crap out of me. I fell down and I remember him staring over me, snickering like some rat face school. This sort of thing was the norm. It was how our relationship worked. He'd dog me out, I'd take, and he'd eventually get bored and go away. But that day was different. I stood up and sucker punched him. To this day, I consider it the best punch I've ever thrown. My fist connected just under his right eye with a sickening, wet thud. I felt his bones shift under the weight of my fist. He crumpled to a mound on the concrete and I stepped over him and went home. When I don't see the guy for the better part of a week, I figure I'm in the clear. I stood up for myself and won. This is what my dad was talking about. And then one night, I'm out practicing my free throws alone on the basketball court. I see a group of guys heading my way. I think nothing of it until I see my tormentor wordlessly step onto far end of the court. Right eye bandaged. I later found out that I had cracked his orbital with that sucker punch, with 3 of his friends behind him. My heart sank. I knew what was coming. They beat me savagely for the better part of 5 minutes. Every time I went down, they kicked me until someone stood me back up. The grand finale was pinning me against the fence, holding a knife to my throat and making me beg for my life. I went to the hospital and was treated for a concussion, bruised ribs, innumerable abrasions, including a 2-inch wide, 1-inch deep gash on my bicep that had to be sutured, and 2 broken fingers. One of the guys had accidentally stepped on my hand when I was on the ground, getting off a train in Chicago Union Station and having to crap really bad. I already sharted, so I had some pretty gnarly camp butt going on as I tried to cowboy walk to the nearest Thunderdome, get to the crapper, and oh boy, warm toilet seat sparsely covered in strangers' pubes. I sit down only to find the usual 1/4 layer of pee and vodka on the floor. I take my dump and realize there is no toilet paper. This was a rather terrifying experience. When I was around 19 or 20, my grandfather passed away after a long illness. He was an incredible man and figured in some significant moments of my county's history. Late one Friday night, I arrived home pretty wasted and headed straight to the kitchen to make some snacks. The house was completely quiet except for some background noise of the TV which my mum had left on as usual to scare away any would-be burglars. So I'm sitting there on my own munching away on a bacon sandwich, when all of a sudden I hear my grandfather talking in the other room. I nearly choked on my snack. I have never been so freaked out in my entire life. His voice was so distinctive. I knew there was no question that he was not in the other room. As I slowly walked out of the kitchen in an incredulous state, his voice started getting louder and louder. As I entered our front room, there he was before me. There was a rerun of a documentary he had once been interviewed in on the TV. It was by far the freakiest, creepiest moment of my life, quickly followed by such happiness and warmth at seeing my grandfather on the TV. This morning I was laying in bed and when I moved my arm to stretch, something freaking attacked my side and I screamed like a little girl. It turns out it was only my phone sliding down the blanket, but Jesus Christ, I was terrified. I was dosed with LSD and no one told me. Started feeling weird, so I left the house I was hanging at and tried to walk home. It took me 2 hours. It's a 10-minute walk sober. Don't really remember much from the walk. But once I got home, my roommate is standing in the dark in the living room and he says to me, I can't sleep. There is something pounding under the ground. I have been an avid Lovecraft reader for many years, so I started to freak the frick out and locked myself in my room. I spent the rest of the trip, that I remember, lying in the dark looking down at myself in the third person. Oh, by guess. Battling my evil alternate twin who was trying to take over my body. My one friend on the other side of the country claims I called him to let him know that my shoes had me trapped in my room and they were coming for me. I was an experienced drug user before this, but it was hands down the single most horrifying experience I've ever had. Just thinking about it gives me shivers. Needless to say, I don't take those type of drugs anymore. TL. Doctor was dosed with LSD without my knowledge and spent the night neck deep in madness. I worked as an assistant manager for a big retail company, but small store, a couple years ago during the holiday season. It was a really rainy morning after a huge sales day and no one was around. It was eerily quiet as I put away some items. I stopped myself for a moment and thought, this is a perfect opportunity for a thief to come in here and rob me. Well, it was one of my few predictions to become as true as it did. A matter of 10 or 20 minutes later, a man entered the store fully covered except for his eyes. I could hear the fear in his voice and sense it in his eyes. And that terrified me considering he had a gun up to my face. Disbelief came before fear, however. I couldn't imagine I would ever be in this situation. I immediately started opening the register while assuring him he could have whatever he wanted. I also instinctively kept my eyes away from him because I didn't want him to think I was trying to remember him to identify him. I figured I'd rather survive this than make him nervous and blast me in his own defense. After giving him a bag full of money, he told me to turn around and get on my knees. It was at this moment I thought I was going to be executed in a freaking retail store. I didn't know what to do. As soon as I heard him say and count to 100, I had rest assured he just wanted me to stay this way so he could get away unseen. I don't know how long I even stayed this way before I felt it was safe enough to turn around and phone the police. It was pretty freaking scary. I haven't worked retail since, and as a matter of fact I moved on to start my career in technology, and I couldn't be happier. I guess some things do happen for a reason, right? Swimming in the ocean off of a boat. The boat had a bad ground in the electrical system. Every time I tried to swim to the boat I felt really weird and I'd lose all my strength. I couldn't keep swimming, so I'd sink. Once I got far enough away from the boat, the field got weak, I could swim up, so I'd pop up again, and then sink again. My cousin on the boat saw me trying to get to the boat and came to me in a Zodiac. I got in it and was fine. I figured I just ate too much or something, but I guess my cousin heard about this happening before. Being whole body shocked isn't fun. TLDR tried to frick a shark but ended up electrified instead. My heart suddenly started beating really weird and really fast. It wouldn't stop, so I started to freak out. Had no idea what was happening to me or what was wrong with my heart. EMS came and took me to the ER where I had a dose of adenosine, a drug that they push into your IV quickly to chemically cardiovert you because it causes your heart to stop beating for a few moments in hopes of resetting it in correct rhythm. It feels awful and you feel like you're going to die, but it has a 6-second half-life, so it passes quickly. The first dose didn't work, so then I got a second double dose. That worked. That entire night was the most terrifying and traumatic experience of my entire life, and I'm still not totally over it. Having a family of 5 and losing your job, burn through your retirement, and then having no money to pay your upcoming bills. TLDR. Young couple tried to kill their baby by making it look like an accident caused by me and my younger brother when we were 10. My brother and I were swinging on the swing sets at a playground. This couple with their toddler baby sits down on a bench adjacent to us. Shortly after, they point their child to waddle in the direction of where we were swinging only 5 feet away. My brother hit him pretty hard with his feet since we weren't paying attention and were just trying to swing as high as we could before jumping. The little guy went flying and we immediately stopped swinging to check up on him. The baby was bawling and bleeding from the mouth, but the parents didn't seem to be too concerned as didn't say anything when they picked their baby back up. I remember their faces showed no expression as they picked the baby back up by the arm. As they went to sit back down with the baby, both of them just sat there not saying a word to each and just watched my brother and me. Once again, we started our swinging contest and they pushed their baby to walk in the direction of us. This time around, I had switched places with my brother and was able to stop just in time before I would hit him. At that moment, I just felt really uncomfortable and told my brother that we should go play some Sega. Went home after that. Told our mom, who in turn called the MPs. I can still remember turning around and looking at both of them just staring at me and my brother walking home. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.